is Jerica with another episode of Blackpacking. And on today's show, I have a guest with me, one of my good friends. Her name's Brittany.
Hey, what's up?
So I brought Brittany on to talk about a few topics with me. So Brittany has never traveled outside of the U.S., but has done a lot of traveling within the U.S. Where have you gone?
So, I've gone all over the East Coast, as far up as like upstate New York, mostly when I was a kid, and then I ventured out west, kind of southwest, New Mexico, Nevada, Arizona, parts of California, Arkansas, Colorado, and yeah, that's about it.
Any favorite places?
So far, and I keep getting called back to this place, which is why I'll be going back soon at some point. Arizona and Utah are definitely at the top of my list so far. I haven't been able to explore Northwest yet, though, so we'll see what that brings to the table. But Arizona so far has been, one of the most beautiful and just magnificent places I've gotten to kind of travel the terrain of.
I guess like during that trip or any previous trip, what have your experiences been that you feel like were related to like your race or your gender or sexual orientation traveling with your partner?
Yeah. So a majority of that trip specifically, we mostly camped and slept in the car. And with both of us being biracial, me, black and white, and she's Indian and white. So, we definitely, on the other hand, were obviously very, protective of each other and just very aware of where we were, because anytime you go to a place, or at least in my experience, anytime I've gone to a place that's new, I always, you always have your wits about you, because you're pretty unfamiliar with your surroundings. So just being very aware of that, and knowing that not only were we both of color, but also have the kind of intersectionality of being gay, and just being very aware of or trying to of our surroundings, and being careful of where we did go. But like I said, we camped a lot, and we didn't come in contact with an excess of people outside of the other people that were also camping in the state and national parks that we were in. So the one situation I can think about that we definitely were scared, legitimately scared, or we got that bodily response, was when we camped somewhere on the border of, I believe, California and Nevada, and I still to this day don't remember the name of it, because we just needed somewhere to stay, and we looked up BLM land, and this is what popped up. If you don't know what BLM land is, super awesome for travelers. If you're camping, it's a lot of times it's either donation based or free camping outside of national parks or state parks. So they're really awesome places to camp at if you're on a budget. But anyway, this place that we were at, this land, it was, down a really long dirt path, and it was pretty remote. There wasn't a lot out there. There were only a couple farms and pastures, and we, you know, we ended up looking at there were like 10-ish camp spots, and we, you know, drove down the rest of this road and looked at the rest of the camp spots, came back, and went to one of the first couple ones we saw, set up camp, and then, you know, as we were setting up camp, we noticed this truck that drove by. There weren't many cars on this road at all. We were the only car that drove into this campsite, and we didn't see anyone else camped at this campsite necessarily. So this truck went by one time, went by another time, and we just figured they were looking for, you know, looking at the camp spots, seeing which one they wanted to choose. And this truck went by, and it was going by super extremely slow, like 5 miles an hour every time it passed us. I'm not sure what they were doing, but the like 7th time they passed us, me and my previous partner got super spooked. We just both had this really strange, weird, and strong gut feeling to leave that area. And that was the only time that we were that spooked that we left an area. I mean, we literally took camp down in like 2 minutes, packed everything up, and we ended up sleeping in a Walmart parking lot that night because we were so spooked about that spot. You know, not to say that these individuals necessarily, you know, I don't want to put 2 and 2 together by any means.
Totally.
But,
it was just a different time.
It was a different time in this country. Things have shifted in a way that fear has elevated.
Yeah, the fear is definitely elevated. And I don't want to necessarily speak for you on this. You can add whatever you want. But when I talk about this fear, this anxious feeling that I get, it's not like I'm gonna be attacked. Yeah, that's definitely a possibility, but that's to me the extreme of something bad that I think would happen to me. Alone, when I think of this fear, I think of something really, really minor almost, just like a comment being made, a stare, some form of harassment even.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily I feel like I need to carry a weapon on me because someone's, coming after me because of the way that I look. It's hard to explain. I think that's the best way I can explain it, is just the fear of feeling uncomfortable around someone, not necessarily that they are going to personally attack you, but knowing that they have this hate towards you or this strong dislike towards you without knowing who you are at all. And I think for me, that's where that fear and uneasiness comes from me. I can't necessarily speak for you.
No, I definitely agree. And during my trip out west, we definitely there weren't any specific comments necessarily, but we definitely had looks, and I think another thing that I wanted to add to just being on that trip specifically is we had our dog with us, and she's a 70-pound pit. I don't think necessarily people didn't really want to mess with us. People were kind of scared to even come towards us, and just the stigma behind pits across the world is so strong that I think the effects of that were coming into play with people, in any way being rude. We definitely, like I said, we definitely had looks.
Yeah. You got a stigma on top of a stigma.
Right?
Having a pit bull with you. They're oh shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're not talking to them. Do you think, as far as, like, I know you want to travel outside of the States, do you feel any hesitation with that? As far as...
I do and I don't. Depending on where, I've looked at going to South America several times. It's still a goal of mine. And I've looked into, more recently, I'm looking into New Zealand, and I feel like there's definitely just certain areas that are more appealing when it comes to feeling safer. And, just depending on, where you're at, color or being of any color can, affect or impact how others will look at you. I mean, if you go to portions of South America and you are of color, you're, based on what people have told me and what I've read and just research, you're more likely to be, accepted than like white individuals necessarily.
Yeah. Which actually, that brings me to a question that I kind of want to ask you, how you feel about it. So when I first put out this podcast, I got a lot of great feedback from you all. Thank you. A lot of really good questions and some bad questions. But one question I got from an individual, he's white. He has never traveled outside the country, and he listened to the podcast, and his question for me was kind of along the lines of, like, why don't I feel safer traveling to certain countries, being a person of color? And he kind of felt like there was a stigma against white people and traveling overseas, and he was kind of, he had the best intentions, and I don't think he knew exactly how to formulate the question that he wanted to ask me, but he kind of felt like, especially in the current state of the United States and Trump and being like a white male, that there's more of a target on his back. And he used Egypt as an example. He's always wanted to go to Egypt, and he thought that it would be easier for me being black to go to Egypt and not be harassed versus him being a white American going to Egypt and being harassed. And his perception is kind of like seeing the news and watching all these stories of Americans being kidnapped and tortured and stuff. So that's where his fear came in. And I still don't really know how to answer his question. I understand his concern, and the best way for me, how I responded to his question, was kind of telling him that I feel like international travel and tourism and not any country, but a lot of countries target someone that looks like him when they are creating their tourism and like development plan. Like, to me, traveling overseas is meant for the white traveler. It's designed for the white traveler. Yeah. It's designed for the traveler with money. It's not necessarily for people of all color. And that's kind of like what I told him. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? Because you kind of just you kind of said something along those lines, and I thought about that question he asked me.
So I feel like again, when traveling anywhere, no matter your race or ethnicity, like, have your wits about you and be respectful. Obviously, do your research, learn what you can about the culture and the environment you're going into. Outside of that, it's definite. Traveling internationally is definitely not designed for people who don't have the means to do so. But I'd say, to him specifically, don't let certain things stop you from traveling. Like, number one, we wouldn't have gotten anywhere in the world had, travel not been introduced.
Yeah, I think what was so interesting about that question for me was that he asked about Egypt, an African country specifically, and it wasn't like a European country. So, I don't know. But since we're in the area of Egypt, and there's been a lot of crazy things going on in Sudan right now. Hopefully by the time you all hear this episode, you're aware of what's going on in Sudan.
And if not, become aware.
Which is really difficult right now. We were talking about earlier, we kind of know what's going on, but a lot of the information seems spotty, or it just doesn't seem to tell a story of what's really going on in Sudan. What have you heard specifically?
So, generally, I've only read what I can online and what's been going on with the protest over the past several months and year occurring, and their president stepping down, which I haven't been able to find much information on the reasonings behind that, outside of just pressure from the people and protesting. So I'd really, would like to know more information about that. If anyone else has information, please, inform us. But other than that, just the heavy policing that has advanced and kind of just brutalizing the people that, live there, that are trying to have a voice, and really just being silenced.
Yeah, and being overpowered.
Killed.
And always in situations like these, I feel like women and children are the first targets.
Oh, yeah.
And that's kind of the situation, to my understanding, that's going on. This president steps down, the military kind of takes over, people are still peacefully protesting for a better government after, this dictator steps down, and this militant government is not happy with that, and they're trying to control these people in such an excessive way. And I guess where I am with it is not hearing a lot of information about it on the news, like knowing that it's going on. I'm hearing more and seeing more information on social media, and Instagram, and people, being like, I stand with Sudan, which is great and it's awesome, but that's the only place I'm getting my information from. And a lot of people are kind of, they're pretty pissed off about the lack of information, and is what I'm seeing on social media, is people are being like, why is no one talking about this?
Yeah.
Everyone cared so deeply,
about a precious white church.
about that damn church in Paris.
Yeah.
Billions of dollars. And then we have hundreds of people, being murdered and raped in Sudan, and the only place I hear about that is on social media. And it's kind of mind-blowing that actually, it's not mind-blowing. This is exactly what happens is citizens in developing countries just having to fight for basic human rights, and no one pays them any attention at all. What are your thoughts on it? What have you seen on social media?
That's actually one beneficial aspect, I think, of social media. A lot of the things that get filtered out through huge news sources are almost always on social media and apps, like Facebook. A lot of the huge things that you think that would be getting covered on these huge news sources, I always see them on social media, and I get a lot of knowledge and information from apps like that, whether it be Instagram or Facebook. And then when you go try to find the information on these sites, it's not even on the main page. You literally have to search for it like it's not happening or it's not important to cover, and that's insane to me. I mean, what's happening in Sudan and what's happened in other countries where people's rights are being depleted, the majority of these news sources don't put these on the main pages while it's happening.
While it's happening,
that's the thing. While it's happening, you don't see it, but like weeks later, then it's almost this.
And they're like, it's been going on for months, and I'm like, months,
right? And that's not on your page when it's like, I don't understand how it's not being covered when it's live and happening right then.
Yeah, like perfect example. So CNN's kind of my weakness. I don't know why I like CNN, but I've been reading CNN for a very long time, and it's usually my go-to. I don't know why it's my go-to, but it's my go-to when I want to find out like exactly what's going on. And I went to CNN's page today, and there was nothing on the cover that talked about Sudan, and I was shocked. This was like one of the first times I was like really surprised that I did not see a lot of coverage about that on CNN's page. I thought that that was gonna be my source for information. So second source, Google, and I Google what's happening, and then I get the drop down. Fourth down, I get Sudan, and I click on it, and then I actually do find a CNN article, and the title is "What's Going On in Sudan and What the U.S. is Doing About It, Explained." And so I'm reading this article, and then I start thinking, like, I know the U.S. isn't doing much. Like, what should the U.S. do? Should they do anything? Like, it's so hard to gauge how much involvement and at what point do we involve ourselves into other countries' political turmoil. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about it? I just feel like it's hard to say, like there's no right or wrong answer.
Yeah. And I feel just based off of maybe our history of intervening into other countries,
it's like we're bad at it.
Yeah.
I wish we were like a good country to where I could be like, yeah, we should be helping, but sometimes I don't know if we're the ones that should be helping people.
We could go on and on about our aid and our using our military to aid, which doesn't always, and in fact a lot of times does more damage than good. But, you know, I think that in terms of how we could address this, and I haven't read that article or necessarily even thought that much on it for this specific scenario and what's going on in Sudan, but, you know, medical aid is what comes to mind first and foremost, is providing that, you know, no matter what. I mean, we're all fucking humans, and we should, you know, be able to provide that and invest that money or very small monetary value of giving that to a country that's in need. And I think that's throughout the world, you know.
Yeah, like for some reason it's like at least our past shows that like we fight military with military, and it's not usually or money, or lack of money. Like sometimes I feel like there are countries that need our support financially and they don't get it. But medical aid is like never something I feel like is like the first response that we give other countries. So I'm glad that you brought that up. That's a good point, especially in a situation that is occurring in Sudan. Why do you think that no one wants to like talk about these things, especially like someone like CNN that's supposed to be like our liberal news source and is supposed to be, you know, caring about everyone, but you know, sometimes they do kind of like lack on these major worldwide news stories.
Absolutely.
Do you have any thoughts on why that might be? I don't know. It's like, it's disappointing,
really
CNN. I love you, CNN. What are you doing?
And
I need you in Sudan right now.
I look at CNN. I look at NBC and NPR, and try to like kind of circulate through those, because I see a lot of things posted on one page, you know, one source that isn't even on the first page of of another. And CNN, you would think, because of how large CNN is and the backing that it has, that they would be or would have those important articles and stories instantly, you know, like the breaking news headlines, that is not the first story currently, that Sudan is not at all, if that's not surfaced, it doesn't make sense to me, and that people's lives have been taken and the country is in that much turmoil currently. Why aren't these huge news groups covering that? Why isn't it, or, you know, maybe they're not necessarily not covering it, but why isn't it on the main page at all?
But like the US, like what I always tell people is what I've kind of learned traveling overseas is we're like the role model. The United States, we're the role model for the rest of the world, whether like we want to be or not. So many countries like look up to us and like look at us for what to do, like how to react, how to handle a situation. Like American culture is everywhere, and people are so like envious of us, and they see our like these lives that they think that all of us live, and like they want that, and people just like look to us to like do something. But yeah, so that's kind of what's going on in Sudan. I know we kind of got a little off topic talking about Sudan, and neither one of us have been there, but I think we both were kind of feeling in our hearts that it was important to talk about and bring exposure to. And if any of you have thoughts on how the U.S. should respond to what's happening in Sudan, like, please let me know. That would be great. Brittany, do you have any more questions for this Blackpacker?
Yeah.
This official Blackpacker?
One question I have, since we're on the topic of the people in countries standing up to their government, was, while you were in South America, did you come into contact with people of certain countries that were combating the current government or system that they were placed in?
Yes, twice actually. The first time I was in Guayaquil, Ecuador, and there was a protest going on about the education for the students there. What specifically, I couldn't quite interpret from the lady that was explaining it to me in Spanish, but what I saw appeared to hundreds, it could have been thousands of people, at least marching and or protesting for better education for the children in the city. And I think it was in the middle of the day, so it seemed like everyone had taken off work to attend this, or they didn't go to work to go to this protest, and they all had signs in Spanish. I'm trying to translate, and I kind of got a gist of what was going on. So that was one situation, and then another situation was when I was in Montevideo, Uruguay. I know I talked about this in the first episode, taxi drivers protesting Uber, but this was also going on there, and I don't know what it is that Uber has done specifically to upset so many taxi drivers, but it's all around the world. And what I found so beautiful about this protest in Montevideo was the cops had actually set up barriers and had blocked off the streets and were protecting these taxi drivers that were protesting having Uber in their city. The cops were aligned. Also, secret place to go to is Uruguay. It is. It is. Those people are so happy, and they just have a great sense of community. Weed is legal there. Gay marriage is legal there. But yeah, they just seem to have like really good core values, and I thought it was amazing that the police were helping these taxi drivers like shut down like in the middle of the city of like City Hall, like shut down right in front of them and be like, we don't want Uber in our city, and the police had their backs.
Take note, America.
So yeah, two kind of like what I consider positive, peaceful protest of just a group of people being like, we want this for our people, we want this for ourselves, and just given the opportunity to speak up for themselves. So yeah. Thank y'all for listening to another episode of Blackpacking, and thank you, Brittany, for taking the time out and sitting down with me and recording a episode with me. I appreciate it so much.
Having me.
Until next time, until the next story, that's all we got. We're out. Bye.